Lock It Up podcast. Tune in to stay safe.
Welcome to our deep dive today into the world of cybersecurity.
Yeah, it's certainly a hot topic.
It really is. And, it's one of those things everyone feels like they should know more about, especially with all the jargon, all the headlines. It can feel kind of overwhelming, right?
Yeah, definitely.
So we're going to be diving into a couple of chapters from a cybersecurity course today and see if we can't demystify some of this. I'm really curious about, I guess just first off, even defining what a hacker is.
Right.
Because the imagery that comes to mind is, well, you've seen the movies.
Yeah, definitely. Not always the most accurate representation.
Exactly. So how does our source material define what a hacker is?
Yeah, so they describe a hacker as someone who uses technical skills to explore and manipulate systems.
Okay.
And what's important to note is that this doesn't inherently make them a criminal.
Okay, so it's not inherently a negative term like it's often used.
Right. It's more about how these skills are applied. For example, we have white hat hackers. They use their knowledge for good, working with organizations, finding vulnerabilities before the bad guys can exploit them.
So they're almost like ethical hackers then.
Exactly. Ethical hacking is a huge part of what makes our digital world safer.
So it's almost like having a security consultant who can think like the bad guys.
Exactly. They can anticipate attack vectors and help organizations build more resilient systems.
That's fascinating. So we've got the good guys, the white hats, but of course, like any good story, we need the villains too, right? That's where the black hat hackers come in.
Absolutely. These are the ones who use their skills for malicious purposes. Data breaches, stealing information, spreading malware. They're the ones making those headlines you mentioned.
And it's not always just lone wolves, right?
No, not at all. We're talking organized crime, even state-sponsored hacking for espionage and sabotage.
It's a whole other world out there. And like any good underworld, I'm guessing there's a gray area too. You mentioned gray hat hackers earlier.
Right, the gray hats. They're a fascinating bunch. They might expose vulnerabilities, but often without permission. Kind of like cybersecurity vigilantes. Their intentions might be good, but their methods, well, they can be legally questionable.
So it's kind of forcing an organization to confront their weaknesses, even if it's not in a way they appreciate.
Exactly. It creates this ethical debate. Is it okay to break the rules, even if it's for the greater good?
Interesting. This whole idea of ethical hacking and different hats makes me think of those red team versus blue team exercises you often hear about in cybersecurity. Could you explain how those work?
Absolutely. It's a bit like a friendly competition, or maybe not so friendly, to strengthen an organization's security. The red team, they play the role of the attackers.
Okay.
They try to penetrate the organization's systems, simulating real-world attack scenarios.
So they're like the white hat hackers, but they're working within this controlled environment.
Exactly. Their goal is to find weaknesses before the black hats do.
Okay.
Now, the blue team, they're the defenders. They build and maintain the organization's defenses, firewalls, intrusion detection, incident response plans. They have to be ready for anything the red team throws at them.
So it's a constant back and forth trying to outsmart each other.
Exactly. And that's how both teams get better. The red team's attacks reveal vulnerabilities, and the blue team's response strengthens their defenses.
It's like a constant cycle of learning and improvement. But I have a feeling it doesn't always have to be this adversarial relationship, right? You mentioned purple teaming earlier.
Yeah, that's right. Purple teaming is about breaking down the silos between red and blue teams. It's about collaboration, sharing knowledge, and learning from each other to create a more holistic security posture.
It's interesting. So it's not red versus blue, but rather blending them together to create something stronger.
Exactly. It's about leveraging both offensive and defensive perspectives to create a more robust security posture.
This has been fascinating. We've already debunked one big myth that all hackers are bad. It's amazing how much goes on behind the scenes in the cybersecurity world. We kind of touched on it earlier, but I feel like we need to define our terms here. What exactly is cybersecurity?
It's a great question.
Yeah.
And you're right, it's often used as this catch-all term. Our source defines cybersecurity as the practice of protecting systems, networks, and programs from digital attacks.
Okay, that makes sense. Pretty straightforward.
It is, but it's also a bit like saying cooking is just mixing ingredients. Technically accurate, but it doesn't capture the whole picture.
Right. There's got to be more to it than that.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Cybersecurity is really about ensuring the confidentiality, integrity, and availability of information.
Okay, break that down for me.
So confidentiality means keeping sensitive information private. Only authorized users should be able to access it.
That makes sense. What about integrity?
Integrity means making sure that the data hasn't been tampered with. It's accurate, it's reliable.
Okay, so you're preventing things like someone hacking in and changing financial records, for instance.
Precisely. And then we have availability. This ensures that authorized users can actually access the information when they need it.
So it's not just about keeping data safe, but also making sure it's usable, right? Like, what good is a bank account if you can't access your funds?
Perfect example. You need all three elements, confidentiality, integrity, and availability working together to have true cybersecurity.
That's a really helpful way to think about it. So now that we've got a handle on what cybersecurity is, why should the average person care about all of this?
It's a question I get a lot. People think, oh, this is something for big companies to worry about. But the truth is, anyone who uses the internet is a potential target.
You're saying cybercrime can impact anyone, not just big corporations or governments.
Absolutely. We're talking identity theft, financial loss. Imagine having your bank account drained, your credit score ruined, your personal information out there for anyone to use.
That's scary stuff.
And it's more common than you might think. Cybercrime magazine estimates that by 2025, cybercrime could cost the world $10.5 trillion annually.
$10.5 trillion. That's hard to even wrap your head around.
It's a global crisis in the making. And it's not just about the money. Think about the impact on critical infrastructure, our power grids, healthcare systems, transportation networks.
If those are compromised, things could get really bad really fast.
Exactly. So, yeah, cybersecurity is definitely something everyone needs to be concerned about.
Okay, so we're all basically living in this digital world now, and it sounds like we all have a stake in making sure it's secure. But cybersecurity is such a vast field. Where do you even begin? It's like saying, go learn about medicine. Where do you even start?
I hear you. It can definitely feel overwhelming. Our source material does a good job of breaking it down into some key domains, though. Think of it as different areas of specialization within the larger field.
Okay, so what are some of those areas?
Well, you've got application security, which focuses on making sure software applications are secure from design to deployment. Then there's cloud security, which is becoming more and more important as more organizations move their data and operations to the cloud.
So that's about securing those online services we all rely on.
Exactly. And then there's data security, network security, mobile security, the list goes on. It's really about identifying specific areas of vulnerability and developing strategies to mitigate those risks.
So it's like having different teams of specialists, each focused on a different aspect of protecting a fortress.
That's a great analogy. You've got to secure the walls, the gates, the towers, every point of entry. And you need experts who understand how to defend against different types of attacks.
This is making a lot more sense now, but I'm realizing it's not just about the technology, is it? There's a human element to all of this, too.
Absolutely. In fact, one of the weakest links in any cybersecurity system is often the human element.
You mean like people falling for phishing scams, using weak passwords, that kind of thing?
Exactly. We can have all the fancy firewalls and intrusion detection systems in the world, but if someone clicks on a malicious link or gives away their password, it can all be for nothing.
So how do we fix that? So we've talked about the good guys, the bad guys, and everyone in between. But now let's get to the good stuff. What kind of threats are we actually facing out there in the digital world? Because flipping through this chapter, it seems like a new headline every day.
It does, doesn't it? It's like a constantly evolving threat landscape. But that's what makes it so important to stay informed. Knowledge is power, right?
Absolutely. So let's break it down. What are some of the biggest threats that we should be aware of?
Well, let's start with a familiar one.
Malware.
Malware. It's like the common cold of the internet, pretty much.
Yeah.
But just like the common cold, it can manifest in a lot of different ways. We're not just talking about those annoying pop-ups or viruses that slow down your computer.
Oh, it's gotten so much more sophisticated than that, hasn't it?
Light years ahead. Nowadays, you have things like ransomware, which can completely lock you out of your own files until you pay a ransom.
It's terrifying. It's like being held hostage, but by your own computer.
Exactly. And then you've got spyware, which operates in stealth mode, silently collecting your personal information without you even realizing it. It's like having a digital stalker constantly watching your every move.
Okay, so malware is definitely something to watch out for. What else is on the list of cyber threats? Because I know there's a lot more.
Oh yeah, there's no shortage of ways for the bad guys to try and get you. Another big one is phishing, which you've probably heard of.
Phishing, right? Those emails that try to trick you into giving up your personal information.
Exactly. and they've gotten really good at it. It used to be that you could spot a phishing email from a mile away full of typos and grammatical errors.
Yeah, it was always, "Dear valued customer," with some really obvious plea for your bank details.
Right. But now they're crafting these incredibly convincing emails that look like they're coming from your bank, a colleague, even a government agency.
It's scary how convincing they can be.
Exactly. That's why it's so important to be extra cautious about any email you receive, especially if it's asking for personal information.
Okay, so be wary of emails. Got it. Anything else?
Well, how about denial of service attacks? Ever tried to access a website and it just won't load?
Oh, all the time, especially during those big online sales.
Right, well, sometimes that's just a server overload from legitimate traffic. But other times, it could be a denial of service attack. That's where hackers flood a server with so much bogus traffic that it can't keep up with legitimate requests.
So it's like creating a digital traffic jam, effectively shutting down a website or service.
Exactly. And those attacks can have a huge impact, especially if they target critical infrastructure like banks, hospitals, or government websites.
It's amazing how vulnerable we all are in this digital age.
It is. But the good news is there's a lot we can do to protect ourselves. A lot of it comes down to awareness and practicing good cybersecurity hygiene.
Okay, so let's talk about that. What are some practical steps that our listeners can take to stay safe online?
First and foremost, enable two-factor authentication whenever it's available.
Two-factor authentication. That's a thing where they send you a code to your phone, right?
Exactly. It adds an extra layer of security to your accounts by requiring you to verify your identity through a separate device.
So even if someone gets their hands on your password, they still can't get into your account.
Exactly. It's a simple step, but it can make a huge difference. And speaking of passwords, make sure you're using strong, unique passwords for all of your online accounts.
Okay, that's a big one, but I'll admit it's hard to remember a million different passwords. Any tips?
I hear you. That's where Password Manager comes in handy. It's like a digital vault where you can store all your passwords securely.
And you only have to remember one master password to access the vault.
Precisely. And a lot of them can even generate strong, unique passwords for you, so you don't have to come up with them yourself.
Now that's handy. Okay, so two-factor authentication, strong passwords, password managers, what else?
Be extremely wary of any suspicious emails or messages. Think twice before clicking on links, downloading attachments, or replying with personal information, even if it looks like it's from someone you know. It's always best to err on the side of caution.
It's like that old saying, trust but verify.
Exactly. And if you're ever unsure about something, don't hesitate to reach out to the organization or individual directly to confirm.
That's great advice. Now, before we wrap things up, I wanted to shift gears a little bit and talk about the people working behind the scenes to keep us safe cybersecurity professionals. Because it's easy to get caught up in all the technical stuff, but there are real people doing this work, right?
Absolutely. And it takes a special kind of person to thrive in this field. They need to be incredibly analytical, detail-oriented, and able to think like a hacker to anticipate and mitigate potential threats.
So what are some of the things that cybersecurity professionals actually do on a daily basis?
Oh, it varies depending on their role in the organization, but in general, they're responsible for things like monitoring networks for suspicious activity, installing security software and updates, conducting vulnerability assessments, and developing incident response plans.
So they're kind of like the digital detectives and first responders of the cyber world.
I like that. That's a great way to put it. They're the ones investigating cybercrime, patching up vulnerabilities, and helping organizations recover from attacks.
It sounds like incredibly important and challenging work.
It absolutely is. And because the threat landscape is constantly evolving, cybersecurity professionals need to be lifelong learners, constantly staying up to date on the latest trends and technologies.
And our source material mentioned a few certifications that are valuable in this field, right?
Yes. Some of the most recognized ones are the CEH, which stands for Certified Ethical Hacker, and the CISSP, or Certified Information Systems Security Professional. These certifications demonstrate a high level of knowledge and expertise, which can be a huge asset in the job market.
So for anyone listening who's interested in a career in cybersecurity, these certifications are a good place to start.
Absolutely. It's a growing field with a lot of opportunities, and those certifications can definitely give you a leg up.
That's fantastic. Well, I feel like we've covered a lot of ground today. We've talked about the different types of hackers, the evolving threat landscape, the importance of user awareness and cybersecurity hygiene, and even touched on the crucial role of cybersecurity professionals.
We definitely have. And I think the biggest takeaway is that cybersecurity is everyone's responsibility. It's not just an IT issue. It's something that impacts all of us in this digital age.
Absolutely. So listeners, stay informed, stay vigilant, and stay safe out there. Until next time.